People have to stop writing off the Ukrainians. Okay? I'm not writing them off at all. I think they have probably a better chance of winning this war than Russia does. Welcome back to the Schaik Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Van Schaik. We don't have a co-host today. She left me. Guys. She's never coming back. I don't know. Hopefully she does. If you don't know, I made a video on my main channel that I believe is being shadow banned. And you may be asking, well, how do you know it's being shadow banned? There's a lot of little indicators, such as it being capped in views per hour. That'll get all its views in the first part of the hour, then no views in the second part of the hour. It's also the topic that I think they're just trying to not cause additional damage or additional, disinformation in their eyes. So they're only relying on reputable news sources. Reputable guys, reputable, not hooligans like me. What I really want to do is talk about what I mentioned in my main channel video for anyone who actually watched the video, because again, it was shadow banned. So slim chance you actually saw it or felt, came up in your feed. And it's very unlikely that this video and this podcast will actually show up in your feed too. So it's kind of fruitless for me to even do this because its chances are it'll be shadow banned as well. A few things that we want to cover is that in my main channel video, I asked you all, what do you think Vladimir Putin will do? Do you think he's going to not do anything? Do you think he's going to go in and take part of Ukraine, take all of Ukraine, start World War III? And ask you to tell me what you thought in the comments below. And I mentioned I'll give you my thoughts on a podcast, so here it is. Obviously, I kind of have an idea of what he's going to do because he's already in Ukraine as we're filming this on February 25th. And it looks like they're going to completely, of course, take over completely Ukraine and install a puppet government into Ukraine and just kind of run with that. So that's their idea right now. However, I guess the bigger question is, guys, is Vladimir Putin actually going to do more than just go into Ukraine and maybe actually take over other countries that were former Soviet Union, such as Poland? Is Putin going to go into those as well? So we're going to be covering some of that. In addition, we have a few other items to cover. I think a lot of people get it all wrong with the military, and they have this idea, and it's been disproven time and time and time again. Over and over has been disproven, but people still have this disillusion with the military. And I was watching some military general the other night, him saying, well, F equals MA. In other words, force equals mass times acceleration. Okay, there's that, that's a component. However, that's not the only component. And you can ask the United States. The United States knows better than anybody. And also Russia. We'll get into that in a second. But the United States knows more than anybody. That's not always the case. Look at Vietnam. Look at Iraq. Okay? It was even Afghanistan to some extent. It is very, very hard to occupy a country and to impose your will on a country. Just because you have a big military doesn't mean that you're going to win. It doesn't mean that. And, all these military generals are saying, oh, well, of course, Russia's going to win. I mean, they could. Maybe. And maybe temporarily, but maybe not. It's very difficult to win a war that's not on your home turf. This is not football where it's like, oh, well, you're 55% more likely to win at home. No. In real war, you're like 90%. Maybe. It depends on the circumstances, of course, but it's extremely high. You know the territory. You know your home. You have also the home spirit. The invader that's coming in is just taking orders from the guy at the top. In this case, it's Vladimir Putin. As Vladdy, as we called him in my main channel video. Vladdy is telling these guys to go in, and they're following orders, like, okay. But they're also being asked to die for what cause? What cause are these Russian troops dying for? Really, what cause? Ukrainian troops, and Ukrainian people that are fighting against these Russians, yes, it's quite obvious of why they would die and why they would fight. and why they would fight to the death and why they would fight harder than anybody. But the Russians are like, hey, man, Putin wants this shit. I'm just getting paid. Dude, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it? And that's the thing. For a few deaths, okay, some of the troops are like, oh, this is kind of weird. Why are we dying? Oh, I knew that guy. Oh. But then as soon as it starts to get more and more and more and more bloody, it's going to be like, you start asking the question, why? Why? Is it really worth it? Is it really worth doing what we're doing? Is it really worth dying for? I think especially in the 21st century where, we're just not just obedient to whoever's our leader in the country. Maybe back 100 years ago where you really didn't have a lot of media, you really didn't know much, you just were like, oh, whatever the guy at the top says to do, that must be good for me and my family, so we got to do it. Not nowadays. Nowadays, too many people are educated, and also, here's the thing, educated in the course of human history. And no, human history, we know why we shouldn't just follow the guy at the top. Wait a second. Just because this guy wants to do it doesn't mean it's the best interest for me or my family or my country. Like, this guy is just being greedy and he's just insecure. Insecure about his place in the world and has inferiority complex. That's what's going on. It's only a matter of time before the Russian troops start to realize that completely, fully, and start to be like, yo, man, like, why? What's the point? What's really the point of this? Is it worth dying for? Is it worth never to see my family again and leaving my children? These guys aren't 18 years old, these Russian troops. They're in their 20s, 30s, and they have family. They have a son, a daughter, a wife, a loved one at home. And they're not just like, this is nothing better to do. The whole point is that it's really hard to win on the offensive in war when the other side is on the defensive and they have home field advantage. I'm just thinking back. Think back to the American Revolution. You can ask the Brits, right? How did that work out? So really, people have to stop writing off the Ukrainians. Okay? I'm not writing them off at all. I think they have probably a better chance of winning this war than Russia does. They really do. Here's the other thing. The entire international community, guys, right? The entire international community, as you all know, is all for Ukraine. I've never seen this. They're all rooting on Ukraine. They're all protesting. Even Russia. People are going to jail in Russia for treason to protest the war in Ukraine. They're going to jail for treason, not just for trespassing or some small infraction. Treason, which could possibly be death or a very long prison sentence in Russia. And they're protesting. That's how much they believe in it. Well, what's in it for that? Well, they have some family in Ukraine. They have loved ones in Ukraine. They're like their cousins and brothers. Why are you attacking them? And that's what is really causing a lot of additional pressure. Because if you think about it too, some of these Russian troops are going in and causing this battle, starting this battle, and they know it. To do what? To kill your brothers and sisters? To kill your cousins? It makes no sense. Over what? Oh, well, because Vladdy's a little insecure and he has some inferiority complex. That's really what it's about. It's Vladdy's inferiority complex. That's why everyone's against it. There's protests everywhere. All in the United States, all internationally, and Europe, everywhere. Moscow, it's crazy. Everyone is against this war. Everyone is rooting on Ukraine. Plus, it's like David and Goliath, too. It's the underdog. Everyone wants to root for the underdog, especially when the underdog is getting bullied around by their neighbor. If you don't know already, I renamed my More channel DVS News so that I can post more of like raw footage of police footage and some of that kind of stuff, maybe with some brief commentary. Also to give input on news stories that aren't specifically body language or behavioral sciences or psychology related, and just give an additional perspective on something on that channel. That's the idea with a name change of that channel. And also I'm thinking that, hey, I already have a podcast to talk about something more that I talk about on my main channel. So I'll just use my podcast to talk about, anything more or do a more on video here where we can just talk about the topic more. So just some quick programming update for you. So basically everyone hates Putin now. Everyone, every single person, we all hate Putin. And I don't think Putin ever expected that. I don't think he expected that. And now he's in this position that is kind of precarious. He's like, what do I do now? Everyone hates me. Literally everyone hates me for doing this, causing an absolute ridiculous, pointless, senseless war resulting in bloodshed. He's going to have to think about who he wants to be in the international community because he thinks very much and relies very heavily on what others think of him, as you saw in my video. So it's a big question now. If everyone's going to hate him, how is he going to respond? Is he going to be like, oh, well, I was just kidding. Oh, sorry, that was a mistake. Oh, no, not Putin. Not Putin. Is he going to embrace his new persona of being the villain of the world? But I can give some ideas. Because Putin is fairly insecure and relies heavily on what people think of him and cares about public persona, as we saw, he's not going to be able to just get out of Ukraine easily. I don't think that's in him. Just to be like, hey, guys, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just insecure. I think Putin doubles down. That's what I think. I think Putin doubles down. I think Putin is also going through a little bit of a end-of-life crisis because he's 70 years old now. This is his last hurrah in his lifetime. After 10 years, turns 80, he's basically done. When you turn 80, you kind of pass your prime. And Putin knows this. And he's like, hey, do I want to be known throughout the ages? Or do I just want to be known as some guy who just sat in Moscow and everything was just not really that great in Russia during that period of time, and that's just what it was? No. I think Putin wants his name to last, and I don't think he cares really in what way. I think in his mind, it's all power related. It's all specific to power. Hey, am I going to be powerful? Am I going to be able to show how powerful I am? Am I going to be somebody who's going to be known as this powerful figure? Remember this, guys. Remember this. People who seek power generally don't feel very powerful in themselves. That's why they're looking for external gratification of power. When you feel that insecurity, you seek power. I would say a lot of people who enter public life, specifically those areas of high visibility and perception of high power, those are people that are very, very insecure. Not everyone, of course. There are those exceptions, but I think overwhelmingly, yeah. And it's scary sometimes because, that's who's going to be running the world, is people who are very insecure and are scared of losing power. So with that said, I'm implying that Vladimir Putin may not be over with what he's doing here. I think he's going to do whatever he can to not lose this first. Give the perception that he did win this, even if he maybe didn't really win it. He just has to give the perception that he did win it in his mind. And then he is going to, I 100% believe, 100%, he is looking at other countries that are neighboring Russia and Ukraine from here. He's someone who's seeking power. This is a power grab, and it's all based on insecurity. It's an inferiority complex. It's all based on that. When it's based on that, it's really scary, guys. It's really scary because you have Adolf Hitler syndrome. You really do. Because, why did he do it? He felt very insecure. He felt insecure with who he was. He was insecure below, right? He didn't have much below. I think he had like one testicle or something. And, he felt very, very insecure as a person and grew up immensely insecure. So when someone feels that insecure, they just want to grab as much power as possible to offset that insecurity and make them feel not insecure. However, it's kind of a little bit of a drug too. The whole grabbing of power. It's kind of like gambling. someone who's addicted to power, and it starts to come on, right? Oh, I take one country, I take one part of a country, then I take another. Whoa, I feel even better about myself. I feel even less insecure about myself. That's how Vladimir Putin may likely feel, such as with Adolf Hitler. That's why Adolf Hitler did it. That's why Adolf Hitler went from country to country to country and just tried to take them all over, because he felt very insecure. And the more countries he would take over, the less insecure he would feel. And generally, guys, insecurity is probably one of the biggest motivators. One of the biggest motivators. Fear is the biggest motivator. However, insecurity is what? It's based on fear. It's fear that you're just not good enough. And here's the thing too, Russia, of all countries, have experienced this both sides of the benefit of being offense and defense and home field advantage versus away disadvantage. Russia, of all countries, knows this. They know it. It's ridiculous. Russia knows this. And here's why. World War II, what actually, killed off Hitler was that Hitler tried to go in to invade Russia. Putin should know this. Russia knows this, that this is something that doesn't end well for the country that's invading. Also, they know it on the other side of actually invading and being the away team and being the aggressor and being on the offense and fighting the home field advantage team with Afghanistan. In 1979 and going into the 80s, Russia was at war with Afghanistan. And yeah, that didn't work very well. They got their asses handed to them. And do you know who was leading the Afghan army? That's right. It was Osama bin Laden. And that's when Osama bin Laden was an ally of the United States, because we were hoping that he and his troops and whoever he was recruiting would go and destroy Russia to prevent Russian expansion, or really Soviet expansion at that time. Osama bin Laden was an ally of the United States in the 1970s and 1980s because he was fighting a Soviet Union. They know how hard it is to win a war that's not on your home turf. And right now, Ukraine is not exactly losing, I would say. They're not exactly losing. They're calling up anybody that is 18 to 60 years old. They're saying can't leave the country, even though some of them are leaving the country, and saying you can't leave the country, you have to fight. 18 to 60-year-old males it is. I don't think any females they're requiring. So, yeah, 18 to 60. And they're actually allowing anybody that has an ID. Literally, all you need is an ID. And for them to be like, okay, anybody with an ID to grab a weapon. They will hand you a weapon if you have an ID. That's all you need. You go to the office there, and you're like, hey, here's my ID. Like, here's your weapon. Good luck. It's kind of scary because it's kind of like what you hear in movies. Like this idea of like, oh, well, in the case of some crazy circumstance where some crazy leader decides to invade another country, what would happen? This is it. This is it. And it's all over the internet too. And the mainstream media is trying their best to cover it, but it's really covered best on social media because you have people with their camera phones and are like, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. People are shooting at each other. Russian tanks are coming down the street. Hey, look, there's bombing raids. Let's video it and post it to social media. That's what's going on. And it's all over social media right now. And Ukrainians are specifically showing it. And what's really cool too is that they're showing where the Russians are and what the Russians are doing. In the past, you wouldn't really know. And, you may just have a phone call with somebody. Oh, it's really bad over here. People are being shot at. That's all you really know. Nowadays, with social media and camera phones and just have the ability to take a picture and video anywhere and send it to anybody and as many people as you could possibly ever want, it just goes out and everyone knows what's happening before they arrive, right? So everyone knows like, okay, well, they're doing that over there, so we get to prepare because they're going to do that to us here. And it's very effective. And they know ahead of time what's going on. It's really alarming that nowadays, in the 21st century, we're not talking, 30, 50 years ago. I mean, come on. Aren't we past this? Aren't we past this? Are we cavemen? What the hell is this? Where just one man's greed of wanting to take over another country because he's insecure and has inferiority complex, and he wants to do that, and now innocent people are dying by the dozens, and it's going to be hundreds and hopefully not thousands, but it can be very, very high like that on both sides. The Russians don't want this. I'm pretty sure that the Russian military, like, they're kind of like scratching their heads a little bit when they're in battle and they're doing this. They're probably even talking to each other. Why are we doing this again? What did they do to us? What's going on? Why? Why are we doing this? And you know what? That actually sets this whole situation ripe for a military coup. It actually does. So if you have the military generals that are like, hey, no, we don't want this in our country. No. They can easily just take over the government because they own the military and say like, hey, you want to take over the world. You want to take over these countries for your senseless, ideas and just some senseless insecurity that you apparently have. That's what you want to do? Okay. We have the army. We have the guns. So, yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm just throwing out ideas that in situations where you are very much disliked, a leader is very, very much disliked and disagreed with, hated, and causing senseless damage and just for no reason at all, other crazy things happen too. And I think we're in a position where it may get quite volatile. It may get very volatile over there. I think Putin is definitely looking at other countries, and he wants to see how it goes in Ukraine. And I think he's going to look to country to see what he can do. And people say like, oh, well, NATO, Article 5 of NATO. It doesn't mean anything really to Putin. I mean, what does that mean? The United States is what, going to ship some troops over there? Like, no. Then the United States are in a way too, right? They're away territory, and they're coming into the, it becomes just like, why? And then he's maybe betting that the United States will eventually say, hey, why do we lose troops to this country, to Poland, say, oh, why are we losing troops here? I mean, is it really worth it? He's hoping that would happen maybe if that would proceed in that way. We don't know, but I'm pretty sure Ukraine is not going to be the last if he wins in Ukraine, or if at least he can perceive in his mind that he won. I think he will try others. It's an addiction. When you take one country, you're going to take them more and more and more, because someone who doesn't really have to answer to anybody, but just feeding their insecurity and making themselves feel better about who they are by just conquering country after country after country, yeah, it becomes an addiction, and it's kind of scary what could happen if he continues that way. And here's some evidence that Putin may actually do that. Donbass, the eastern part of Ukraine, what did he do? He annexed it. He said, oh, we have 2 new countries there. 2 new countries. Why would you do that if next day or 2, I think it was like 2 days later, he goes and takes over all of Ukraine? What's the point of even doing the whole Donbass thing that he did? Saying that, oh, we have 2 new countries now. I mean, was that even necessary? It makes you think that maybe he is getting more and more power hungry. That taking over Donbass made him feel very, very powerful. It's like, wow, this worked out well. No one really said anything. I was able to do this. I feel better about myself, he thinks. And then he does more and more and more and more. And with a guy that's, kind of approaching that time of his life, that's the sun is setting, it's kind of now or never for Vladimir Putin. Am I going to be known as this big known leader of Russia that did something big? Or am I just going to be known as a guy that just hung on to power, sat in Moscow, and really didn't do much? Or does he want to be known throughout the ages? The big question is, why now? And I don't mean why this year or, why not last year or anything like that. What I mean is, why not 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Why not then? Why now? And here's the reason that I can come up with. One, he's getting older, as we said, and he's kind of coming to end-of-life crisis. Also, he needed the military to do it. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the military was really not much. It really wasn't very strong. He needed to build up the military to get to this point where he could go and take country after country after country, if that's what he may do. He needed to build up the military. The military wasn't built up 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years. It wasn't built up to this level. The big question is how will he act? What will he do if he is able to temporarily take over Ukraine and install a puppet government in there? That's the big question. Be very authoritative and use that country to springboard himself to maybe take other countries like Hitler did? Or will he try to act very reasonable and rational? If he tries to act very reasonable and rational, you can't take over country after country after country, act very reasonable and rational. The way to do it is just, kind of snowball it. Well, okay, get one. Okay, now use that country to springboard over to this one. Okay, and use their military to springboard and get them. And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, right? Because when you take over a country, you take over their resources, you take over their economy, you take over their military. Is Putin going to assume all of that when and if he were to actually, at least temporarily, take over Ukraine, if he were to so do that? Will he actually snowball it and try to springboard himself to country after country and try to take over more? That's the big question, because you cannot just occupy one country and just be like, okay, we're going to be fair. We're going to pretend we're fair here. And you can have your rights, but we're just going to have a different government. It's a different guy in charge. No. That's not how you take over country after country after country. The way you do it is being very authoritative and just taking over everything, just literally just grabbing their entire economy, their entire military, their entire infrastructure, all their people, just bring them to their knees and then use them against another country. It sounds terrible and it's horrible, but that's what is typically done when rulers and leaders take over a country and want to expand further and take over more countries. I don't know if a lot of you saw the video of the Russian warship telling the Ukrainians on this island to surrender yourselves, or we'll bomb you. And basically, in short, what they said is, okay, Russian warship, go fuck yourselves. And really what the Ukrainians can do is use that as their Alamo. These guys died for their country, and he said, fuck you, before they died. It doesn't get much better. It's just to tell your enemy, fuck you, and then just accept it. That's their rallying cry, I think. Use that, springboard off that, and you know what? When the Russians go on their loudspeaker and say, surrender your arms, just go back. Just say, fuck you. That's what I would say to the Ukrainians. Just say, fuck you back, and keep fighting. And it's really sad because you know that a lot of people are going to die. A lot of innocent people, including Russians. They're innocent too. They're probably scratching their heads too. Like, what the heck? Why are we doing this? It's just so senseless. It's sad because you're seeing all these young men, and a lot of women too, go into combat and they're talking like about, holding up arms and with their guns and saying, we're going to fight. And that if they do, they have a good chance that they may not come out alive. The Russian military is way stronger than Ukraine's. The exact numbers, just to give you an idea, 209,000 active personnel is Ukraine. 900,000 active personnel is Russia. 900,000 reserve personnel is Ukraine. 2 million is Russia. So 2 million they can easily just call up. 2 million. And artillery, this is like cannons. Ukraine has 1,800. Russia has 4,700. Armored personnel carriers, 622 Ukraine. And then Russia is 6,100. Tanks, 858 versus 2,840. 35 attack helicopters Ukraine has, and 394 Russia has. 125 active Air Force planes Ukraine has, and 1,000 planes Russia has. Big difference. And just to leave you with something, it was in the movie Troy. War is old men talking and young men dying. You have an old man, Putin, that wants to write his name in history because he's insecure. He has an inferiority complex. So there he is. He's talking and saying, oh, well, do this and go do this. And then a whole bunch of young men, and also probably some women too in the Russian military as well, are dying now because of one man's greed. All right, so that's what we got. Now in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, what do you think about the situation in Ukraine? Do you think Vladimir Putin will actually attack more than Ukraine? Or do you think maybe he just is going to be okay with just Ukraine and he's going to stop there? Let everyone know in the comments below on YouTube. And also remember, you can get our podcast anywhere you get your podcast, including Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it. That's where you can get the podcast Shaked. That's all we got for you. Let's cheer on Ukraine. See you at the top.